Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your hosts.
Welcome to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Stephen Lewis, and I am a catalyst for positive change in communities and businesses. Now, for over 2 decades, I have inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Kimberly Danielle. Kimberly, it's good to see you.
It is good to see you and good to be here with you. I am Kimberly, and I am a community builder, a communication strategist, and a coach who comes from generations of faith-driven leaders and entrepreneurs who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. Today in our episode, we are just going to take it back to a conversation that we had last season, and one that I actually recently received emails about because listeners were still inspired. So I'm excited to take you back to our conversation with Victor Koo, who is the co-founder of Tianren Culture.
Yeah, Victor offered us more than just insights into the intersection of tech, media, and finance. He gave us a vision of business as a place of joy, wisdom, and collective health. Now, from his philosophy of one wisdom, one health, to his deeply personal meditation practice, Victor reminds us that true connection, wisdom, and innovation starts from the inside.
Yeah, I was thinking about this episode before we started recording and just kind of going back to the conversation. And there was a couple of things that stood out. One, you kind of just touched on, Stephen, but I remember he was talking about social impact in particular. Sometimes we have to unlearn our habits in being too results oriented, because sometimes the outcomes and impact can be unintended and unexpected. And in that, we just have to be more intentional, more aware of what it is that we're doing, but not just base it in just results, but how we are carrying ourselves through our businesses, not just the results in and of itself. And also the importance of looking at the unintended impact as well as the intentional impact, but the unintended impact, because you might be impacting folks in a way that is not for the greater good. And so I think that's an important piece to remember and tune into that as he talks about that in the episode. And then one last piece, this was the big thing for me, not focusing solely on external factors, but tuning in to that inner voice, tuning into that intuition. You kind of hit upon this, Stephen, and what you just said before, and how that can be a superpower.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, he talked about the importance of looking at the intention and the path that you pursue. And so when you think about leveraging technology to enhance social impact and, one's wisdom, this one wisdom and one health, what he oftentimes talked about was paying attention to careful design. So how do you design carefully when it comes to working with technology? And I think that's really important in a time and a moment when so many people are gravitating and just reaching for any new AI app to incorporate into the work. And so key elements that impact communities when starting a business, one of the things that he talked about was prioritizing clear purpose and intention. Again, this is all related to that kind of careful design. And thinking about what social issues is being addressed. What are these social issues being addressed for? And what are their causes? And to look at the impact. But when looking at the impact in the design phase, think more about your intention. Once again, careful design, and how you will monitor your progress. So we hope that you will be excited about this. So let's revisit some of the most powerful moments in this exchange with Victor.
And I'll just say one last thing before we go into the conversation. If you are reflecting on how to build a business that aligns with your values and honors your well-being. And I'll say that just in general. I know Steve and I talked about several things here, but if that's where you are and what you're looking for, this conversation might resonate with you. So make sure you tune in, and let's just go ahead and get started.
I'm excited today, Kimberly, because we have with us Victor Koo. Victor focuses on inner purpose and social services and investing. In late 2016, Victor co-founded Tianren Culture, a next generation social platform that serves as a catalyst and enabler of social innovation with the mission to foster positive global values and lifestyle. Tianren's Culture core strategic focus is to promote one wisdom, one health by encouraging and enabling wisdom and service via contemplative practices and healthy lifestyles, especially for those with Eastern roots, believing that the physical, mental, and the emotional, spiritual health and well-being of humans are interconnected with the broader environment and ecosystem. Now, Victor's professional experience is mostly at the intersection of technology in the media sector, as well as private equity and venture capital investment. In 2005, he founded Hai Holdings, which incubated Yoku in 2006. Victor led Yoku as a chairman and CEO to become a leading multi-screen media and entertainment company in China. And Yoku was listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2010 and in 2016 and completed its privatization and merged with Alibaba Entertainment. Victor now serves as the chairman of Hai Holdings, which currently focus on disruptive innovation and social impact investment areas such as health, genome, and new protein. He is also a senior advisor of Texas Pacific Group and a business advisor to DeChain Capital. Victor received his MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he currently serves on the advisory council. Victor, it is so good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Stephen. And also thank you, Kimberly.
How do you believe businesses, regardless of their industry, can truly contribute to positive social change, leveraging tech, media, and finance?
Thank you, Stephen. I think positive social change should really be the part of a company's or business's founding intention and the DNA from the very beginning. Like you said, the last startup I was involved in the private sector is an online video platform that distributes and produces content. The mission our team decided on is sharing joy, wisdom, and heart. For example, the web-based original content strategy that we started around 2008, 2009, were all designed with this mission in mind. So the first thing is you got to really design with positive social change. Secondly, I say that it's a social-minded core team where you have clear responsibility to not just the investors, but also other constituencies and the broader community. Make sure that you do no harm, consider all the externalities and unintended consequences, whether in terms of the product service you deliver at the workplace with your team, as well as also your supply chain as well. Because nowadays, a lot of supply chain covers the world. And it's sometimes quite hard to track all these different suppliers, for example, in terms of its social responsibility. Now, these rules apply across all different sectors, but I think when you look at social industries or social sectors like health, education, food, for example. Now, on the other hand, you've got high-risk sectors like oil and gas and military that almost you want these kinds of companies to really be responsible about tempering their efforts and making sure that they slowly wind down if that's or kind of really reform into different kinds of sectors and as well as the process, even though you have the right intentions, the right team, as well as really thinking about and all the aspects I mentioned.
So let me ask you this. Why is it important to tap into our inner voice being, and what does it enable us to access and do regarding our work in business?
That's actually a very important question that you just asked, Stephen. Let me just preface that by a little bit. in terms of, we talk about the polycrisis that we're all facing. And what's interesting is we like it looking at root causes of problems rather than just the symptoms. And when you look at all the issues that people are talking about, mental health crisis, zoonotic diseases, geopolitical conflicts, as well as climate change, all these areas appear to be very different at the surface level. But at its core, it's really lack of human consciousness in terms of how we think about the wisdom. And the geopolitical conflicts, as well as actually all these inequities in the world, are really disconnection to each other, which is really causing, in terms of factory farming, all these animals in very small cages, as well as very enclosed environments that create, even flu, COVID, all these zoonotic diseases is really human cause. And of course, climate change is our extractive view of the natural environment, right? So we're not looking at the environment in a sustainable way. It's our disconnection to the environment. But all this is really based on a lack of human awareness as well as wisdom. And that's why going inner, like you described, is very, very important. And I would consider that in modern society, there's a lot, arguably, way too much thinking and doing, and not enough feeling and being. Now, thinking analysis does help to break a problem down to its components, which can help to a certain extent. But over-reliance, which is often the case, or too much thinking and doing without looking at these problems in a holistic way, often lead us down the wrong path, actually. And that may appear efficient in the short term, but actually unwise or create unintended consequences. And by giving ourselves space, gets us in touch with our inner self. Inner knowing, shall we say, that may often come with creative ideas as well as true solutions. I practice 2 hours plus per day in a variety of breath work, meditation, other kinds of movement practices, and ideas and solutions that comes in these times are actually much superior to the things I do after a long period of analysis. So as you gain experience, obviously you do want to go to the external environment to ask a lot of questions and do the analysis, but always I come back to the inner voice. You sometimes find that your perspective actually changes. And often this is a much better really approach. And I call this a capability, almost even a superpower that can be accessed, practiced, and enhanced over time.
So it's not an either or, it's a both and, but because we have not spent as much time cultivating that inner wisdom and consciousness, we need to do more there.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It's not or, but at the same time, because modern society is by far majority on one side, there needs to be a balance, right? I think it would even be nice to say right now is 90-10%.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say that, you can start with 20% inner, but I actually probably do 50-50. And when you do that, I always start with the outer first, but the final decision don't get made until I do the inner work. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be kind of the best path forward.
For social entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses, what are key elements that they should prioritize when really thinking about truly being impactful to our communities and our environment?
I think a couple of things. Clear purpose and intentions, what social issue is being addressed, what is this being addressed for. I think that's something that really needs to be well considered. Also, first principles or root causes, because you rather to want to prevent something versus actually, if you look at a lot of social work and philanthropy, a lot of it is addressed to what I call last mile problems, really therapeutics, because they are often too late. And the problem becomes so escalated that they're really disasters or emergencies. And by that time, you have to move a lot of resources. You don't have a lot of time. And the outcome generally is not so good, right? But I guess for a lot of people, the ability to want to save something, I think is a natural instinct. But I think it's better if you can prevent something, then there's nothing to be saved. So I think that's another way. And similarly, because I think there's also a natural tendency, and maybe borrow from the private sector, to look at things like impact, like you described. And I think it's natural to do that. And you should really monitor that. But when in the designing phase, I think it's more important to think about your seed or your intention, shall we say, and who you're working with, ecosystem, the partners, and how you monitor the process. So because these social issues are so complex, you don't know what's going to happen. You're trying to define a lot of these results and measurement and impact. Sometimes it's almost, I would say, fictional or kind of imagined, because you find that there's going to be a lot of turns that comes up with something very, very different from what you expected. And so really the idea of emergence, which I've learned from great partners too, because I also came in this with a very, very much a planned top-down kind of model in the private sector, which I found to be really not that effective in the public sector because of the complexity. Just to give an example, in the private sector, the measures are clear, and they're usually one or two. But the public sector, there's really no clear measure, and there's a broad spectrum of things, and there's all kinds of externalities and unintended consequences that is really in a bundle. And so that's why it's a very kind of different emerging approach that we found to be a lot more effective.
Stephen, I want to ask you, I want to hear from you. What do you hope to see happen in the field of entrepreneurship, especially social entrepreneurship, in the coming years? I mean, I think that's a good question to kind of dig into, especially after this conversation that we had with Victor.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what I would like to see is more people have the resources, the inner resources, as well as the external resources and support to really make the kind of impact that they want to have in their communities beyond just generating revenue. How do we actually change lives and make our communities a better place and really inspire a more hopeful future? And my hope is that, that social entrepreneurs are first line responders to the kind of tough social challenges and problems that our communities face, and that with the right kind of resources, inner and outer, that they can really make the kind of impact that make people's lives better, that improve our environment, that generate the types of resources to create the future that I think we all long for. And so I would love to see that.
Wonderfully stated. Well, I hope that's the future that we can live into. And we're trying to really kind of carve that out in our own little area of the world here with Do Good X. And there are many other organizations who are working with social entrepreneurs or creating the resources for that impact to happen as well. So if you are tuning in and you aspire to be a social entrepreneur, or you are early in the game, you'll know that your work is needed, right. Your work is necessary. If you're a supporter or an investor in the work of social impact, thank you for the ways in which you are supporting entrepreneurs and really to make our communities thrive and to make our environment sustainable for all of us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you join us again in the next episode. Until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.